Cedar Vale, Montana. The clock read 3:18 in the afternoon. Summer was fading. Heat waves shimmered above the crimson earth, mingling with sorrow. Beneath a sky so scorching it seemed to bend the very air itself. A widow 7 months into her pregnancy hoisted a post-mall. She swung and missed, then collapsed onto one knee. A shadow stretched across the corral she would lose before the sun set. A Harley motorcycle rumbled at the gate. The rider shut off the engine and sat watching in silence. Before we dive in, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. If this story resonates with you, please hit like and subscribe so you won't miss another tale of resilience and brotherhood. June Consincade worked the graveyard shift at Red Cinder Truck Stop. She planted her boot against a split cedar post and swung the maul once more. Heat shimmered across the pasture in waves. The baby delivered a sharp kick beneath her ribs. 12 head of cattle grazed beyond the creek, her final assets before the bank's 30-day deadline expired. She had already sold her wedding rings, a saddle, even the piano Tom had tuned every Christmas without fail. The corral represented the last requirement for tomorrow's buyer. Without it, there would be no sale. Without a sale, there would be no closure. A throat cleared near the gate. A man wearing a black cut leaned casually against the bars, his boots dust-covered, his gaze unwavering. Rowan Gravel Tate, captain of the Hells Angels Bitterroot chapter. She recognized the rocker patch, though not the man's face. He raised both palms in a peaceful gesture. "Need a hand, ma'am?" he offered. She tensed immediately. "Need a day I don't have to pay for?" She shot back. He nodded slowly. "Let me loan you one." He made no move to approach. He simply assessed the posts, her blistered palms, the bent nails scattered about. A county notice fluttered on the fence. The word stamped across it read, "Code violation, unsafe." June yanked it free with force. "Sheriff's hobby," she muttered. Gravel's expression grew cold at the mention. "Name?" he asked. "Clay Rudd." Gravel's jaw tightened around the name as if it tasted rotten. Sheriff Clay Rudd. Half the county lived in fear of him. The other half owed him favors. He had worn the badge far too long and wielded it like a personal weapon. Word around town suggested he had been pressuring widows with overdue mortgages, offering so-called protection in exchange for favors no law could ever justify. June bent down to lift the next plank. Her breathing labored. Gravel reached out once, then froze mid-motion when she flinched instinctively. "Relax," he said, his voice dropping low. "I don't bite unless someone earns it." She shot him a look, part defiance, part bone-deep exhaustion. "You here to watch or actually swing a hammer?" He smiled, but it was thin and humorless. "Depends. You paying union rates?" A laugh escaped her, despite everything. It was the first she'd released in months. Something small but real cracked open inside her. Gravel stepped through the gate and picked up the fallen maul. His arms moved with practiced rhythm, each strike landing precise and efficient. June watched, hypnotized by the steady tempo. "You build fences for a living?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, ma'am. I break them." Her brow creased with confusion. "You some kind of outlaw?" Gravel glanced up, his eyes steady and clear. Only when good folks get cornered. By the time dusk arrived, the corral had taken shape. It was rough but solid. Sweat darkened both their shirts. Gravel didn't speak much throughout, just worked. When June attempted to lift another post, he stopped her with a gentle hand. "You're running on empty. Sit." She hesitated, then lowered herself onto the edge of the water trough, one hand resting protectively on her belly. The child stirred within. Gravel brought her his canteen. The gesture was simple, yet his silence conveyed respect rather than pity. "Your husband?" he asked softly. June's eyes remained fixed on the horizon. "Dead since last winter." A bull got spooked. "Threw him clean off." Her voice was flat, rehearsed. "Sheriff Rudd said it was an accident. I stopped believing him the moment he offered to buy the ranch 2 days later." Gravel's grip tightened visibly on the canteen. "He offers again?" "Every week. Said I'd make a fine deputy's wife." Gravel spat into the dirt with disgust. "And when you said no?" June pointed toward the notice post. "He made certain no one would buy my cattle." Gravel stood silent for a long, waited moment. "You still got tomorrow?" She nodded faintly. "Barely." He smiled without a trace of humor. "That's enough." The next morning arrived with red light bleeding over the ridgeline like a warning. June packed ledger papers into a worn leather satchel. The cattle buyer from Billings was expected by noon, and Rudd had already driven past once, slow and deliberately watching. Gravel stood on the porch with coffee in one hand and a severed phone line in the other. "Someone doesn't like you making calls," he said evenly. June exhaled heavily. "He's been doing that for months. Wants me isolated." Gravel's gaze turned hard as stone. "He doesn't want you isolated. He wants you scared." She met his eyes without flinching. "Well, he'll have to wait." When the buyer's truck crested the hill, a patrol cruiser followed directly behind. Sheriff Rudd emerged, hat pulled low, a smirk already forming. He climbed out leisurely, leaned against the hood, and called across the yard. "Morning, sweetheart. Guess you didn't get my message about today's inspection." Gravel stepped forward slowly, setting his mug deliberately on the fence rail. "Morning, lawman. Guess you didn't see the no trespassing sign." Rudd's smirk faltered, just for a breath. "You her lawyer?" Gravel tilted his head thoughtfully. "Something like that." The buyer, a nervous city-born man, shifted anxiously from boot to boot as Rudd swaggered closer. "Miss Consincade can't authorize any sale," Rudd announced, holding up what appeared to be official paperwork. "Property under review. Safety concerns." June's pulse hammered in her ears. "You can't, ma'am," he interrupted, feigned pity dripping from his voice. "I can, and I have, unless you're willing to resolve the lien directly with me." Gravel stepped between them. "She doesn't owe you squat," Rudd sneered openly. "You a lawyer now, biker?" "No," Gravel said, his voice calm but razor-sharp. "But I know blackmail when I smell it." The sheriff's hand drifted toward his holster. It was just enough movement to send the buyer scrambling back into his truck. Tires spun Gravel wildly. Silence descended heavily. June's throat constricted. "He'll ruin me." Gravel studied the dissipating dust cloud. "Not if he runs out of power first." She frowned deeply. "What are you planning?" He met her eyes, his expression unreadable. "You said your husband died in a Corral accident. What if I told you it wasn't?" June froze completely. "What do you mean?" Gravel's jaw tightened visibly. "I know that bull." June stared at him, the hammer slipping from her loosened grip. "You? What did you just say?" Gravel nodded toward the distant pasture. "That bull your husband rode. Brown with a white blaze on the snout." Her voice trembled. "Yes. I saw that bull 3 counties over 2 days before the accident," he said quietly. "He wasn't wild. He was drugged, eyes glassy, staggering. Sheriff's brand inspector signed the movement papers himself." June's stomach dropped sickeningly. "Why would he?" "Insurance," Gravel stated flatly. "Your husband filed a claim against Rudd's brother-in-law for stealing calves. Sheriff couldn't afford the scandal." June covered her mouth with both hands. Her entire world tilted dangerously. "You're saying he killed Tom?" Gravel's tone turned gravelly, living up to his road name. "Or made sure the odds did. The wind cut through them, sharp and hollow." June steadied herself against the corral post. "You have proof?" Gravel's eyes flicked toward his bike. "Working on it. Club keeps records, things the law likes to bury. We dig up," June whispered. "Why tell me now?" He looked directly at her. "Because you deserve the truth before we fight back." That night the ranch was quiet except for crickets and the steady ticking of cooling metal from the rebuilt corral. Gravel sat on the porch, cleaning his boots methodically, watching the horizon darken by degrees. June stepped outside carrying 2 mugs of coffee. She moved slower now, with the kind of careful motion that comes from living with pain and pride for too long. "You ever lose someone to men like him?" she asked. Gravel nodded once. "My brother. Small-time mechanic." Sheriff said suicide. "We found bruises on both wrists and a missing camera card." June's throat tightened painfully. "So you fight back for others now?" He stared into the rising steam from his coffee. "Something like that." Lightning flickered silently beyond the distant hills, promising rain. June sat beside him on the weathered bench. "You think your club will help me?" "They already are," Gravel said. "You just don't know it yet." "Why?" "Because you remind us of someone we lost. A fighter, for a while." Neither spoke for several minutes. The storm moved closer, and with it, something that felt like reckoning. 2 days later, Gravel rode out early. June thought he had left for good until noon, when the sound of engines echoed down the valley. 5 Harleys appeared through the rising dust. Brothers wearing matching cuts, faces hardened but eyes respectful. They parked in a perfect line like soldiers awaiting orders. One dismounted, bald with a scar cutting over his brow. "Clay Rudd?" he asked. June pointed toward the sheriff's office sign, barely visible across the ridge. Main Street. The man called Torch nodded once. He's been taking payoffs from foreclosure houses. We've got names, dates, video, but you'll need more than noise. Gravel handed June a folded file. This is proof Tom didn't fall. It's his autopsy report, an unsigned copy someone tried to bury. June's breath hitched sharply as she opened it. Her eyes found the words, blunt force trauma inconsistent with livestock injury. Her knees threatened to give out. Torch caught her elbow gently despite his bulk. We handle justice clean. You handle truth loud. June's eyes lifted, fierce once more. Then let's make the town listen. Cedar Vale's annual livestock fair was the one day Sheriff Rudd paraded himself as savior, judging ribbons, shaking hands, claiming he kept the peace. By noon, the entire county had gathered in the dusty arena. June arrived late, escorted by Gravel and the Angels. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wildfire. The widow, the bikers, the scandal. Rudd spotted them and smiled, a predator pretending politeness. Afternoon, Mrs. Consincade. You finally brought muscle. Gravel tipped his hat courteously. We brought receipts. Piper, one of the Angels' tech crew, flicked a switch on a small projector balanced on a truck's tailgate. The screen illuminated with time-stamped footage. The bull, heavily sedated, being loaded into a trailer marked with the sheriff's family ranch insignia. Then came the payoff logs, his signature bold and clear, and a recorded phone call. The crowd turned as one. Rudd's smirk vanished entirely. June's voice rang out, clear and unwavering. My husband died because you couldn't stand honest men. Rudd reached reflexively for his belt, but Torch's hand clamped down first. Don't, he said quietly. Rudd's hand trembled visibly as deputies stepped closer, not to protect him, but to strip his badge. The county judge, sitting front row for the fair, rose slowly. Clayton Rudd, she said, her voice steady and formal. You're relieved of duty pending investigation. The crowd erupted. Shock, relief, disbelief colliding. Gravel kept one hand firmly on June's shoulder, guiding her back as chaos swirled around them. Reporters pushed forward aggressively. Camera flashes strobed. Torch leaned close to the fallen sheriff. Funny thing about power, he said. You can't hide it once the light hits. That night, Cedar Vale felt fundamentally different. For the first time in months, no patrol car cruised June's fence line. No threats appeared in her mailbox. June sat on the porch watching lightning bugs scatter like tiny floating lanterns. Gravel stood beside his bike, helmet tucked under his arm. What happens now? She asked. He smiled faintly. You rebuild. And I ride on to the next ghost town that needs shaking awake. June's voice softened. You'll come back. He met her eyes directly. If the wind blows right, morning arrives soft and golden. The kind of light that made everything appear briefly forgiven. June's ranch, once suffocatingly silent, now echoed with the sounds of active repair. Gravel's crew had stayed behind. Torch fixing the barn roof, Piper checking the corral wiring. Diesel teaching local boys how to properly weld fence rails. The Angels had transformed her broken land into a small construction site of hope. June poured coffee into mismatched mugs, moving slower but noticeably lighter. Don't you boys have better places to be? She teased. Diesel grinned widely. Not till the lady of the ranch tells us to roll. Gravel leaned casually on a post. They like to finish what they start. June met his gaze knowingly. Including old wounds? He smiled, faint but genuine. Especially those. In the distance, a delivery truck rumbled up the dirt road carrying feed, tools, and fencing materials, paid in full. June frowned in confusion. I didn't order that. Gravel nodded toward the invoice. No, but Tom did. Month before he died. June's eyes filled with something raw, suspended halfway between grief and peace. That night, the Angels cooked over open flames. Laughter bounced off the old barn walls. It felt almost like family, rough, loud, and vibrantly alive. June sat near the fire, one hand resting on her belly, feeling her daughter kick actively. Gravel handed her a tin plate of stew. She's restless, he observed, noticing her smile. She knows it's louder tonight, June replied. Torch passed her a hand-carved wooden charm shaped like angel wings. Old road custom, he explained. Keep it in the crib for luck. June ran her thumb over the wood grain thoughtfully. She's got enough luck already. Meeting all of you. Gravel poked at the fire with a stick. Luck had nothing to do with it, he said. Strength draws its own tribe. June studied him for a long, searching moment, seeing past the leather and scars to the man who carried ghosts like medals of honor. You don't hide from pain, do you? He shook his head slowly. Only from peace. Don't trust it much, June smiled softly. Maybe it's time you learn. Weeks passed steadily. The ranch transformed completely. New fencing, fresh paint, steady trade relationships. Word spread that June Consincade's stock was the best in the valley. Buyers paid fair prices. No one dared cross her name now. Sheriff Rudd's replacement visited quietly to apologize on behalf of the entire department. June accepted, but only said, "Justice isn't a favor. It's a promise kept late." Gravel came less frequently, though the sound of his Harley always carried a certain calm when it appeared down the dirt road. He never stayed long, just long enough to check the water lines, tune her generator, fix small things she pretended she couldn't handle alone. One evening, she asked directly, "Why do you still come?" He shrugged. "Because leaving too clean feels wrong." "Then stay messy," she said. "No one here's asking you to vanish." He smiled, but distance lingered in his eyes. The look of a man already halfway gone. Maybe someday. June reached for his hand. Maybe someday isn't no. He squeezed once, then gently released. Winter crept in early that year. Snow blanketed the fields, softening the scars of the recent past. June gave birth on a quiet Tuesday morning, alone except for Torch and Piper, who stood guard outside while Stitch handled the delivery with practiced hands. When the baby cried, strong and fierce, the angels cheered like celebrating brothers. Gravel arrived hours later, still dusted from the road. June held the newborn, tiny fingers wrapped tightly around her thumb. "Her name's Mara," she said. "Means bitter turned sweet." Gravel smiled genuinely. "Good name." He looked down at the baby, and for the first time since June had met him, she saw his walls drop completely. His rough hands brushed Mara's hair, trembling just slightly. "Your dad would be proud," he murmured. June blinked away tears. "You think so?" "I know so." Outside, the snow continued falling, slow and endless. For once, silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Gravel lingered by the door before saying softly, "She's got your fire." By spring, Cedarvale had fundamentally changed. The townspeople who once whispered behind cupped hands now waved first. The cafe started selling Widow's Brew, a fundraiser blend for single mothers. The angels kept their distance officially, but everyone knew whose code kept trouble off her land. June reopened Tom's brand, King Cade Ranch, the sign freshly carved and flanked by 2 small angel wings. Gravel came one last time before the spring cattle drive. He handed her a set of silver keys. "Backup generator and gate locks," he explained. "Club's covering your feed costs till next season." June tilted her head. "That's not business." "No," he agreed. "That's family." She reached up and touched the patch on his vest. "You ever get tired of carrying everyone else's weight?" He looked away toward the open road stretching endlessly. "Some loads remind you you're still alive." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of grass and new beginnings. "Thank you," she said simply. Gravel's voice dropped to a murmur. "Don't thank me. Just keep riding." June's life found its rhythm again. The mornings filled with the soft chorus of calves bawling and the steady hum of the windmill pump. Nights were quieter, but not lonely anymore. The angels still rode through occasionally, dropping supplies, fixing fences, or just leaving behind laughter that lingered long after their engines faded. One morning, Mara took her first steps in the corral, small boots crunching on scattered hay. June clapped softly, her heart swelling in ways she hadn't thought possible anymore. She looked toward the distant highway, half expecting to see a black Harley cutting through the heat shimmer. Instead, a letter arrived. Thick paper. Neat handwriting. It read, "Heading north. Different town, same storm. Don't wait for me. Build for you." At the bottom, one line in bold. "If the wind shifts west, I'll find my way home." June folded the letter carefully, tucking it into her journal. She smiled through gathering tears. "You always did talk like thunder," she whispered. 2 years passed like pages turning. King Cade Ranch had become something bigger, a place people came to rebuild, to work, to heal. Single mothers, discharged veterans, drifters searching for a second chance, all found steady work and fair pay. June didn't just survive. She led with quiet authority. On a late summer evening, a truck pulled into the yard carrying crates marked Angel Aid. A familiar patch caught the fading light as the driver stepped down. Torch grinned warmly. "Still building fences, ma'am." June laughed. "Still breaking them?" He shrugged good-naturedly. "Gravel sent this from the coast. Said to tell you the ocean sounds like freedom if you stand close enough." She carried one of the crates inside and found baby clothes, books, and a small Harley keychain with Mara's initials engraved carefully. Her hand trembled over it. Torch lingered at the door. "He talks about you like a compass," he said. June blinked. "What's that mean?" "He says no matter how far he rides, you're the place that points him right again." That night, after Mara was asleep, June walked the pasture alone. The moon laid silver across the grass. The cattle moved slow and peacefully. She stopped at the corral, the same one she'd nearly collapsed building, and leaned against the post, breathing in the cool night air. She thought of Tom, of the years of struggle, of the man who'd appeared out of dust and thunder to steady her world when it tilted dangerously. The wind stirred, whispering against the rails, almost like an engine echoing faintly through memory. She spoke to the night softly. "You kept your promise, Gravel. You helped me stand." From somewhere down the road, distant but unmistakably real, came the low rumble of a Harley. One bike, one light. It slowed, paused, then revved twice deliberately before disappearing into the darkness. June smiled. "I heard you," she whispered, hand over her heart. The wind answered, carrying the scent of rain and freedom across the plains. Sometimes love didn't stay. It rode by to remind you it existed. 5 years later, Mara sat on the porch rail, legs swinging freely, hair braided by the wind itself. She was 5 now, fierce and kind, with her mother's fire and a spark that made the world brighter. June watched her daughter wave enthusiastically at every bike that roared down the distant highway. "Do you think he still rides out there, Mama?" Mara asked. June smiled softly. "Every day. Do you miss him?" June looked at the road, endless and sunlit. "I think some people don't leave. They just take the long way home." The ranch sign now read, "Concencade Haven, built by the broken for the brave." Visitors came from towns miles away to see how one widow and a band of angels turned loss into lasting legacy. June poured 2 mugs of coffee, one for herself, one for the empty chair beside her. She lifted hers gently. "To the ones who ride on," she murmured. Somewhere beyond the hills, thunder rolled back in answer. Cedar Vale's sky burned orange that evening as the sun dipped low. June stood beside the rebuilt corral, the same place where her story had started with sweat, fear, and a hammer too heavy to lift alone. Now it stood taller, stronger, each board sealed with memory. She laid her palm on the wood, eyes glinting in the dying light. "We made it," she whispered. Mara ran up laughing, carrying a small toy motorcycle. "Mama, look!" June crouched down, smiling warmly. "That's how heroes travel, sweetheart." Mara grinned wide. "Like Daddy Tom?" June paused, heart full to overflowing. "Like Daddy Tom," she said softly. "And like the man who made sure we got to keep him in our hearts." The wind rose again, gentle but sure, carrying the faint sound of an engine far off. The familiar roar that always came when the world needed a reminder that angels still rode among them. June looked up. "Ride safe, Gravel," she whispered. And the wind answered, "Always. If this story touched your heart, if you believe strength is built and not born, then ride with us. Subscribe, like, and ring the bell for more true-hearted tales of grit, redemption, and the roads that save us. Because out here every mile tells a story worth remembering.